I'd like to call the Thursday, February 27th meeting of the Far West Texas Water Founders meeting to order. And welcome everybody in attendance. Scott is in Las Vegas, so I'm Dave Hall, and I'll be your Thursday. Are there any comments from the public? Do we have any public people signed on? Still no?
No, we do not.
Okay, all right. No comments from the public then. We'll proceed to item 3. Peggy, we got any designated alternates or guests that need to be recognized?
No, I think oh, actually, we could recognize Patricia Beaver, who's with the Lower Valley Water District. She's joined us.
Okay.
Would you like to say hi, Patricia? Oh, her note taker's here. I thought that was Patricia in the flash, but okay, so no, we're okay.
All right, go on to item 4. Review and approve the minutes for the general meeting held on January 23rd, 2025. Everybody's probably had a chance to review the minutes. Are there any comments on the minutes?
Thanks.
Just a second. Okay, we have a motion and a second, right?
And I did Dave and Thomas?
Yes.
Okay.
Is there any discussion? All approved, please say aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Heather?
Yeah.
Item 5, Texas Water Board general updates.
Hi, y'all. Heather Rose with the Texas Water Development Board. I'm a regional water planner and just gonna have a couple updates. Could you pull up my slide? These are mostly
Oh,
reminders.
these are correlative. I'm sorry.
That's that one.
It is funny. Sorry. Okay.
So water use survey is out, and as a reminder, these are an annual survey of your water user group or your entities, how much water they're using, and we ask different questions about your entity. And this data supports the regional water plan, so it's what goes into calculating the demands for the water plan. And you are required to have 3 years of survey data on our file in order to be eligible for any of our state funds. So starting on March 1st, which is Monday, I think. No, it's Saturday. Yeah. Starting Saturday, that will mean we'll need 2022, 2023, and 2024 water use survey data. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. You can email the water use survey team at that email there, or hop on the phone, give us a call, and we'll walk you through any questions you have. Next slide, please. And then as a reminder, we have our agricultural water conservation grants are open for application, and those are due March 19th. And these are grants for really any kind of water conservation in the agricultural space. We funded all kinds of projects, so if you think of anything that you think might qualify, feel free to reach out and apply. We also have our state revolving fund assistance programs are opening, so those are due. The first one's due Friday, March 7th, and then drinking water is due April 4th, and clean water is due April 4th also. And all these are hyperlinked, so you can get more information there. And also, you can always reach out to Teresa Finch at the board. She's your West Texas rep for water supply and infrastructure, so you can always reach out to her for questions too. Next slide, please. And then as a reminder, we have one more webinar on all of those reporting requirements for water loss audits, water use, water conservation, water annual water reports, all the above. It's a lot. So we have webinars to help y'all with any questions you have and how to fill out those reports. They will be recorded, so if you can't attend it live on March 11th, no worries. And you can also reach out to our conservation staff anytime. Jessica Paz is our contact for that if you ever have any questions about any of these reports. And these are required to be on file to qualify for state funds as well. And then we are in the home stretch of our planning cycle. Hopefully y'all will be adopting your IPP today or initially prepared plan. And then you'll turn in the final plan in October. And next slide, please. And then just as a reminder of what to expect the next couple of months, hopefully today y'all adopt your initially prepared plan. And then you'll determine your hearing date, which I'll talk about later in the agenda. And that's 30 days before that hearing date is when your public comment period opens up. And you'll be collecting public comments from the people at the hearing. You'll also be placing copies of your plan at local libraries and courthouses, or county courthouses. And then meanwhile, I will be reviewing your plan to make sure that everything that needs to be in there is in there. Same with Parks and Wildlife, and TCEQ will also be reviewing it, and they'll be providing any comments. Y'all will consider all of the comments that you've received, and then you'll meet at some time in the summer or fall to adopt your plan. And then you'll be submitting it to us by October 20th. That's it for me. Does anyone have any questions? All right, thanks, y'all.
Thanks. Next, we have item 6, consider, discuss, and take appropriate action to adopt the 2026 IPP, which is the Far West Texas Water Plan, allowing the consultant to make minor changes as needed. Prepare the final copies of the IPP and submit the IPP to Texas Water Development Board by March 3rd of this year, of 2025. Jennifer, are you up there with us?
Yep, I am here. Good afternoon, everybody.
We can't hear you.
You can't hear me?
Is the mic on?
Right now, we can't hear you, Jennifer.
There we go.
It's on our end, Jennifer.
Oh, wait, I hear it
Okay.
on here, but not on there.
Testing, testing. Can you hear me?
Hang on, we got something to do.
It's on my computer. I can just turn it up here.
It's just a
Kind
delay. But.
Okay.
Wait, now we're
A little bit of feedback.
somehow do it.
There she is.
Now we got an echo in the system now.
Now I
Two probably same. That may be your volume.
Is it
turned
the-
up.
That's that one.
It could be the podium. Is it turned on? No?
Okay, wait. Mute here.
It's a good question.
Okay. Okay, so can you hear us okay?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can now. You're good to go.
Thank you. All right. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. So we're going to go ahead and just move into our very, very short presentation today. Not a lot going on other than obviously the adoption of our IPP. I'll provide a little bit of an update, kind of where we're at, what we've got coming up here in the next few months. I think Heather touched on that some. But first and foremost, I'd like to say that I'm so excited that it has come together. It took all of us participating in all of the red line revisions and making the enhancements to each of the chapters, and all the feedback that I got along the last, I guess, 3 years that we've really been pouring into this. And so I'm very excited about our draft and just the content of it and how far we've come even since the previous plan. And so that's encouraging to me, as I've been with y'all now for 3-4 planning cycles, is that it's not a stagnant plan. We continue to really take this seriously. We pour into it and create, updates to each of the chapters that best reflect what's going on in the community there in Far West Texas. And so I'm very pleased with our draft. I know that we still have, 4, 5, 6 months to go where the board's going to kind of take that fine-tooth comb and go through and review it for us. And there'll be a handful of pages perhaps with comments that we have to address. And all that is just helping our plan become better and better as we reach that finish line. So Just as a reminder, if you've seen the hard copy of the plan, you probably saw this picture on the front cover. It right now just sits on a white piece of paper. I didn't want that to alarm anybody, so I thought it would be worth just a few comments. This is the photo that Annette and Peggy provided me as perhaps an option for an image of our final cover. Which will be incorporated in with some really neat graphic and design that we're currently working up right now with the in-house graphic team. So what you see on your draft is just a placeholder. And if this picture doesn't suffice, we have time to take recommendations from others who've got, you know, a better picture perhaps, or a different picture. This can be a discussion we have at a different meeting, but the idea behind it is to take the photo that, you know, I think this is a beautiful picture. It kind of depicts the region as a whole. But take this photo and incorporate it with some elements from our previous plan's cover. As you can see, we're trying to make a big enhancement in what our plan cover was for the 2021 plan and what it's going to be for the 2026 plan. Some ideas that I'm talking up with our graphic and design team is I do like the state of Texas and the call out to where the region sits. I think that's an important element that needs to stay on our cover. So that if anybody from the state or out of the state picks up our plan, they know exactly where we're located, what counties we're talking about. It gives them, you know, a good sense of the geography right away before they even start digging into the plan. So that will be an element that comes over to our new cover sheet. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that to your attention. I'm not sure how many of you actually saw a hard copy or took time to kind of download the PDF, and I didn't want that to alarm you. We are still working on that final cover, of which I'll be able to present mid-summer, late summer, early fall, whenever we determine the date for that next regional water planning group meeting, and take some feedback then. All right, so there have been no changes from our January meeting with regard to redline revisions or any additional feedback that have come in from planning group members or public. So what I've been working on is making sure that it will check all of the Texas Water Development Board's requirements, specifically making sure it becomes administratively complete, which kind of has its own subset of requirements. Working with our document processing team here in Corollo to make sure that this plan meets the ADA compatible requirement, which is new to this planning cycle. That to me is kind of exciting. I didn't realize how much work went in behind the scenes to get a PDF ADA compatible, but we have successfully done that. We've ran it through the software that checks for any kind of like gaps or errors, and we were able to produce a report that said there's no errors in this document. It has gone through the ADA software successfully, and the ladies here at Corollo did a fabulous job meeting that expectation. And so if there are no other questions, I'll leave it up to you for consideration to adopt your IPP.
Go ahead.
Jennifer, Dave Etzold here. Page ES3, as that was part of our, I guess the most urgent attention over the last year, where we hired Dr. Fullerton and his team at UT to assess the projections for population. Are these that we see in this draft dated March 2025, are these projections and current population statistics in line with Dr. Fullerton's data, or are they representing the data that we got from Austin?
So we've had many regional water planning group meetings around this. I've presented quite a bit of material as we've walked this out. And so just to remind the planning group, when we were given the original data set from the Water Development Board, our first step forward was to survey all of the entities in the region, all of the WUGs that that would be sponsoring projects that are captured in all of our tables, all of those named water user groups. We surveyed heavily. I know Annette and Peggy helped Juan and I do a fourth, follow-up with them, and we collected all of the data that we needed for that revision request. If you remember, I don't exactly know when last year we were submitting a revision request to the Water Development Board. It may have been 2 years ago, which included all of the data that we had gotten back from those surveys, where the water user groups had provided material to justify some change to the original data set that the Water Development Board had handed us. And we submitted that revision request. The Water Development Board had a bit of time with it and then provided comments. And I came to a planning group meeting and said, here were the comments from the Water Development Board. Here's what they're going to accept. And here's where they recommended that we kind of met them halfway. And for the most part, about 90% of our surveyed responses was accepted by the Water Development Board. There were just a few entities that had not provided enough material, being rural, being that, there's a limit in funding to kind of do that assessment. But the Water Development Board worked with us and kind of met us halfway. So then we had a revised data set, which had projections for both population and water demand that were much higher and kind of more in line with what we think's happening there in the communities with growth. But again, they were never as high as our 2021 plans. And there was a lot of discussion at the time with regard to maybe we over projected what we thought the growth was going to be in some areas. Regardless, as another layer to that, the census came out and said that there was an undercount, if you remember, in some ethnic groups and in some areas pertinent to Region E, and there were also those undercount pockets across, other places in the state. So we added that undercount to our approved, survey revised data sets, and that kind of bumped our projection line up a little more. So then we talked a lot about going out for a second opinion, and it ended up being that Dr. Fullerton was able to do that for us. And when he was able to come to that meeting 3 or 4 meetings ago and present the data, we also did like a comparison, and there were a couple of slides that compared where we're at with our Water Development Board data that includes our revisions and the undercount, and where's Dr. Fullerton's data. And I presented about 4 or 5 comparison slides. And it turns out that our projections have us at a much higher growth trending in 2030, 2040, 2050, 2060 than Dr. Fullerton's. What ends up happening with the Water Development Board data that we've approved and agreed to put into our plan and base our, planning data on is by 2070, our data starts to dip a little bit where Dr. Fullerton's data climbs. And at the time, my conversation to all of you was, try not to get so concerned about what we see in 2070, 2080, because this is a 5-year planning cycle of which we're then reevaluating the data every 5 years. And by the time we get out to 2070, 2080, we'll have a much better understanding of what the population projections ought to be. So with that, the planning group then agreed to put Dr. Fullerton's data as an appendix to Chapter 2. So you'll see it in your plan as Appendix 2A. And he just did like a 1-page little memo. And Scott had pointed out in the previous meeting that there was some information with regard to El Paso County that got left off that original submittal to me. So Annette and Peggy went back out and asked him to consider revising. And so I got that revised version, and that is what is in your IPP. One of the notes that I have made for myself is kind of cleaning up that appendix so it looks a little more formatted with the rest of our plan, and creating some nice tables that carry the data that he's provided us. So We mention in the executive summary, we mention in chapter 1, we definitely mention in chapter 3 and 2 that the planning group did go out to seek a second opinion. We have gotten that second opinion documented in our plan as Appendix 2A, but we have chosen to move forward with the revision request that the Water Development Board approved that came off of the surveys from all the communities represented in our region. And we will reconsider what data we will use in the next round of planning when the Water Development Board provides us projections again for the 7th cycle. Sorry if that was a lengthy explanation, but I wanted to make sure everyone was comfortable with how we've gotten to where we are today.
Thank you. Very detailed. Appreciate that.
Sure. I know that was a big focus this planning cycle. And so I just wanted to make sure that everyone feels comfortable with the paper trail and the conversations that have led us up to our IPP.
Teresa, you have a question?
I do. I had a question about the methodology surrounding the cost analysis. Jennifer, how are the capital cost figured into that cost per acre foot per year number?
Yes, that's a good question. So when we had our meeting last month, we presented our Chapter 5 and Appendix 5A, which is the kind of heartbeat of the plan because it has become the funding mechanism for a lot of these water management strategies that are being represented in our plan by the sponsors. And the Water Development Board has a prescribed process that we are to follow so that statewide, all 16 regions are very uniformed in how they approach the cost estimates for these projects. The Water Development Board provides an updated tool every 5 years to reflect the market values and costs that are current. So we're not using the costs, for supplies and steel and stuff like that from the previous plan. And as consultants, we are to use that tool. It's an Excel packet with multiple tabs at the bottom. And as you start to fill out that front page of that Excel, some tabs will hide, some tabs will pop up, and it helps to guide the engineers through the process of putting in the data that are given to us by the water user groups. So let's say, for example, Lower Valley Water District, we've met a few times, we spoke on the phone, we've emailed back and forth to fine-tune the water management strategies that were in the previous plan to make sure that the details around them have been updated appropriately for this plan. In those conversations, we're collecting the information we need to put into this tool, this costing tool. At the end of that Excel packet is an output table. And when you hit export, it pumps it out to a PDF document that is now required to be in our plan. So that's your Appendix 5C. The board is calculating those costs with regard to, all sorts of details around various strategies. And there's just a lot of different strategies going on in the state of Texas. And that last spreadsheet breaks it down so you can see an itemized list of what gets you to like an annual cost and then what gets you to a total capital cost. And then the bottom section breaks it apart and says, here's the cost per acre foot for the first 20 years. And then when you remove amortization, here's the cost per acre foot for every decade after. So there's factored in, that amortization and the interest there, and then it's pulled off by like the third decade of the project. So we're guided, and I think John Albright could talk, a little more in detail if you needed more answers, Teresa, but we are guided through a process that everyone is being asked to use so that if you're costing a project in West Texas or East Texas, the approach is the same.
Right.
I'll just
go ahead.
They're based on 2023 dollars is the latest costing tool. So it's kind of the market as of 2023, I think September of 2023.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is John Albright. I just want to mention that those unit costs, they also included other soft costs like O&M, operation and maintenance, and maybe purchasing costs and other stuff like that. So it's not just capital costs and not just debt service. So we include
Yeah,
all of that.
environmental survey, mitigation. I know those are costs that get rolled into certain projects.
I found it confusing because some of the strategies, those costs came down like considerably after the first, 20 years, and some of them stayed the same the whole way through. And I don't know if it's just the strategy, because some of the ones that stayed the same were like water loss audit and main
Yeah.
line repair. And I noticed that per capita, per acre foot cost per year, those seem to be some of the most expensive strategies
Yes.
across the line, even more so than like moving water a really long distance. And so I was trying to wrap my head around that, and I kind of couldn't. So I was maybe looking for some help there.
Yeah, so you're spot on. And this is a conversation that I think was brought up very briefly by Scott during our January meeting. The cost for
that meeting. I'm sorry to anybody that we're having to reinvent the wheel.
No, this is good. The cost, where we're seeing some of the biggest spikes in cost is definitely for the cost of pipe. So when I compared some of those water loss audit strategies in our 2021 plan, and if that was still a strategy that that entity wanted, remember we did the water loss audit table where AWWA had a new approach to what they're saying is the sweet spot of how much water you should and shouldn't be losing in your system. And we came up with a list that have entities losing a little bit more water than their preference. And when I compared that list to our last plan where we just applied like a greater than 10%, if you have a loss greater than 10%, because that was AWWA's approach in the last plan, that needed to be accounted for with some kind of water loss audit and mainline repair strategy. Our lists were pretty similar. In fact, we had folks that fell off the list because they had done some repairs, and we had new folks coming in because they were losing water that we hadn't tracked in the last plan. When we opened up the costing sheet from the last cycle and the costing sheet for this cycle, and you say you're going to replace 2 miles, right, to gain, I don't know, 5 acre feet of water, the 2 miles in the previous plan was a fourth of the cost of what it is now. And that was just uniformed across the board when it came to that component. And there were other places where we saw spikes, but the cost of steel since COVID has tripled, if not in some places quadrupled. And that's been a conversation amongst all of our technical consultants in Corello and with Friese Nichols and other firms is just, we're just astonished what the cost of steel is and pipe. And so you're absolutely right, Teresa. There's a huge increase in cost there. And then to kind of provide a little more information, those strategies, we don't assume debt. So at the very beginning of that Excel sheet, I take a year of like paying this off and I make it 6 months, and this has been calculated for the purpose of interest, right? And then we're saying this isn't treated like a normal big wastewater expansion project or a desal project. And so we're just going to keep that cost per acre foot constant throughout the planning horizon. Now, the other thing you're going to want to remember when you're looking at these tables is we're planning conservatively, right? That's been a big topic as we've put all these chapters together. We're planning conservatively so we can account for uncertainty. And at the end of the day, we are earmarking our plan so that, let's just say, Lower Valley Water District, who has a water loss audit and mainline repair strategy in the plan, can go to the Water Development Board for funding, whether it's SWIFT or whatever they decide to use. There's a dollar amount in there that's representing what it might be. You know, these are estimates at a conservative level. So it could be a little bit higher. And for those particular projects, we didn't go down into the minutia and say, okay, well, they probably won't replace 2 miles. They'll probably find through their audit process where those major breaks are, and they're going to focus their time and resources and money to maybe a half a mile and repair those major breaks and see how much water they can save once those major breaks are repaired. But planning is kind of generalized, and it's at a conservative level so that we're not robbing anyone from an opportunity to come in for more funding if they feel like more dollars are needed to do a strategy. So the assumption in those write-ups, you'll notice in that Appendix 5A says, this strategy assumes that only a portion of the leaky, water line will be replaced. And you won't know that until the sponsor has performed, a water loss audit. In the meantime, we've made it general and we've said if you replace, a percentage of that loss applied to the miles that you have in your total system, this is the cost per acre foot constant over the planning period. So I don't know, Teresa, if that, and if we want more, I'm happy to get on a different call
It's okay.
outside of this meeting.
It's okay. It was just confusing to me. And also looking at the fact that you look at those tiny water supplies like Candelaria, like Redford, they're not going to be able to afford to do that each time. And so I was just curious how that came about. So thanks for going through that for me.
You're welcome.
I
you're welcome.
also just had one more question, which was when we were, I think is this table 5.4 where it talked about the environmental impacts?
Uh-huh.
And on even on the larger projects, the environmental impacts that were noted were just basically the disturbing of the ground. And I was just curious as to why, the impacts to springs, to wildlife, to livestock weren't also considered as environmental impacts from the areas where the water would be moved from.
So I'd have to dig into exactly, in order to answer as best as I can, I would have to go into that document. I know that there's a table 5.4 that points you to Appendix 5B, and Appendix 5B outlines what the matrix is to measure these types of impacts that the Water Development Board requires us to consider when we are evaluating all recommended or alternate strategies. And the way that we've outlined that data in that table, we've been pulling from plan to plan. Not that the responses down that column have remained the same, but that format I think was provided to us from the Water Development Board in previous planning cycles. And as you can tell with the table, you're limited space as to how many specific impacts you can illustrate on a table. But I think in Appendix 5B, there's an outline that says when we talk about environmental, this is what's being considered, and this is how the weighting system applies, uniformly across all strategies. When we're talking about springs, because I know we do consider springs and we do consider groundwater, but it's kind of lumped into one of those broader categories that feeds into a measuring, a weighted measuring system.
Right, because that's going to, affect livestock, agriculture.
Yes.
A lot of things at the source.
Yes.
So, okay, Appendix 5B.
And so this is what I'm going to encourage everyone is understand that this is a snapshot in time of a draft that we have to submit along with 15 other regions, but just because we've submitted it doesn't mean we have to stop working on it. We get from now until October 20th to continue massaging and enhancing, each of these elements in our chapters. So I'm not asking right now for you to just accept my answers and then that's that. What I'm saying is I'm trying to explain what we've been doing and how we've come to this point with our data and our discussions and our tables. And we're going to submit that to the board and let them have 120 days to review it. But we get to continue to, massage and enhance. So send me emails or pick up a phone and let's have conversations between now and our late summer, early fall meeting and work these things out in a way where it provides clarity, not just to you, but someone else. You feel certain that it's answering, those questions. So this isn't the end of the road.
I want to thank you and your staff at Carollo. I know we had some bumps in the road that slowed the whole process down, and y'all had to work really, really hard to get caught up and to meet all of the deadlines. And so I want to thank you and everybody at Carollo that worked on this for making that happen.
It's our pleasure. Yeah. And I know that was a really tricky pivot from my former engineering firm to, to Carollo. But for lots of reasons that I could see would impact you as a group and definitely me professionally and personally, it was the right move. And it just, created a lot of obstacles that we had to get over together. And I think what Teresa's pointing out is it took us a while to get a contract in place. And in the meantime, we were up against a tech memo deadline. So we worked, off clock and pro bono just so that we could meet the deadline and stay on track with our planning. And of course, I honestly wouldn't have done it any other way. So you're welcome. You're more than welcome.
That's all my questions.
Okay.
Well, Teresa, thanks for your comments. It's appropriate and certainly wished from everybody. Are there any more comments or questions?
Motions from the peanut gallery.
We need a motion to adopt the 2026 IPP, Far West Texas Water Plan, allowing the consultant to make minor changes as needed to prepare the final copies of the IPP and to submit the IPP to the Water Development Board by March 3rd, 2025.
So moved. This is John Kennedy.
Second, Becky Brewster.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. And Jennifer, I guess we're on to report from Carollo on the schedule of regional water planning and other regional planning efforts.
All right. So I just wanted to add a little bit more on top of what Heather was also explaining in her presentation. And if you're like me, hearing it a couple of different ways, is very helpful. So to give you an idea of where we're at and where we're headed in the next 5-6 months, I've created a slide here, and I know it's kind of busy, so we'll just talk through it slowly. But obviously on the left-hand side, you are accustomed to seeing, that schedule. I've done a snippet and the circle just says, on March 3rd, we are needing to submit our IPPs to the Water Development Board. They will have those draft plans for 120 days. Heather explained that there are 3 different state agencies that'll take time to comb through and review all 16 regional plans across the state. And then we are expected to get comments back somewhere in July, I would say early to mid-July at the latest. And at that time, we, as consultants, will be looking through all of the comments, and this can be pages and pages, and that's not a bad reflection on how our plan was put together. That's just them doing a really great job combing through to make sure that it meets all of the Water Development Board's requirements, that we're consistently referring to, data throughout the various chapters appropriately. It's always nice to have a second, third set of eyes on the document because we've been working in it for 4 years, and it's real easy to have read something so many times that your brain thinks that it's going to say the same thing it said, yesterday when it was read, and doesn't pick up on maybe a small edit or typo. So I'm pleased that they get that time with the document, and then they submit comments back to me, and then I comb through those comments and pull together a small section that'll be included in our final plan as an appendix, where the board says, here's an area on, say, page 2-3 that, you know, needs to be fixed, and they'll have an explanation. So then I have to go in and resolve that comment, and then in that document that I'm creating, explain how it got resolved and where in the plan it got corrected. And this kind of creates like what I like to think of as like a change log. And so as I work through that, I'll be preparing that material along with some discussion around where maybe big changes occurred, if any, or where a handful of changes occurred. And I'll come to our, you know, mid-August, early September meeting with that information. And so as a group, we'll kind of review those comments, review those changes, discuss what we think about the cover page, and really wrap things up to finalize our plan. Once that meeting ends, you will have approved your final plan, giving me some flexibility to, you know, modify and complete, you know, the document in order for us to submit it come October. So anyway, that's kind of the work that'll be happening between, you know, now and that late summer, early fall meeting. While the state has the plan for 120 days, I have a hard copy, and I am already going through page by page, sentence by sentence, and just taking my time reviewing the material and kind of doing my own fine-tooth comb and making notes in the document of places that I think need to be corrected, keep with uniformed, you know, if we've italicized here, we should probably continue to italicize those very, very nitty-gritty details. So I'm working through the plan now, and we'll continue to work on that plan to address comments come July, and then I'll present all of that in our late summer, early fall meeting. So those are the steps that we'll be taking for the next about 4 or 5 months. Housekeeping. Oh, yep. Are there questions?
Oh, I was just going to ask you, where does the public hearing fit into this sequence of events in order to make suspenses for it? Because I didn't see that on your list.
Yes, that's not on my list. When we get to the agenda item 8, well, we can talk about it now, and then that way it makes more sense come that agenda item. So we as a group today need to decide when we want to hold our public hearing. And I have a slide on this, but basically just as a reminder, the public hearing is not a traditional regional water planning group meeting. Any member from the planning group can certainly attend the public hearing if you want, but we don't need to meet a quorum. We don't have to have, you know, both Scott and Dave. We can have one or the other. And it's really just an opportunity for the public to bring forward any kind of feedback or comments that they have about the plan. So the idea is to kind of set that date. It could be anywhere from like mid-April to early May. And that way, the documents that are going out to the county clerk offices and the public library. So I have a list of like 13 entities that did not have a public computer that would allow someone from the public to access the link that is sitting on the COGS website. And so for the entities that didn't have that ability, we have printed out a hard copy, and a hard copy will be mailed to about 13 county clerk and public libraries, so that in each county there is a mechanism for someone from the public to be able to access the plan, whether it's an electronic link or a hard copy. So they have to have 30 days with the plan to set the clock for when we set our public hearing date. So if we set it April 15th, for example, by March 15th, each of those entities have to have the hard copies, and therefore the member of the public now has 30 days, and then they can come to that meeting and provide feedback or have comments for us to consider. And that's all it's the intention is, and then we can just close out the meeting. There'll be no regional water planning group meeting piggybacking on the back end of that. It's just going to be dedicated as a public hearing. And
Do you have-
whenever, yeah.
Do you have a location in mind?
No,
needs
I
to
would
be-
say that's up to you.
Pardon me?
Is
Is Alpine or centralized location recommended?
it needs to be in a place that's the group considers accessible to everyone in the,
We've
so.
used Alpine pretty much as that in the past.
No, it doesn't have to geographically be there, but my point is like here you have you have virtual access. It's up to the group.
Okay.
I mean, I would suggest El Paso or Van Horn, just given the weight of the population and everything.
Okay, well, that's up.
And the technical support,
Well, let's-
frankly, because, I mean, getting it set up like this in Alpine, I think we tried it.
Since I skipped to item 8, let me read that first, and then confirm the date and location for the IPP public hearing and authorization of the COG to publish a 30-day notice of the public hearing. Okay, now.
I'm pretty sure we can get
You
over.
suggest 15 April?
Jeff is commenting.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I was just gonna say that we can have as nice a technical setting in Alpine as anywhere. Just. Yeah, that's all I had to say.
I just wondered if anybody had already thought about a location.
In the past, we've done it at Sol Ross in Alpine, and then was it at the COG in El Paso? Is that what we used to do?
Mm-hmm.
So you had two?
We had 2 locations simultaneous.
Urban and a rural. Have we continued that? Did we do that the last cycle?
Last
I can-
cycle was the middle of COVID, so nobody did anything. It was all,
Yeah.
I have no memory. Okay.
so 2 cycles ago, yeah, that's probably.
So I like
So-
the idea of wherever the heavy populated areas are is considering one of those locations. So we're making it easy for the public to access if by chance there's going to be members from the public who want to attend. We put it out in a rural area. It might be very hard for the larger, populated areas to maybe get there. I don't know. That's a thought. And then the other thought I had is just one, right? Because historically, we've never had maybe I remember one planning cycle where we had one public comment, but historically the attendance is very, very low.
Now virtually, we are
So
going to have it.
I'm
virtually,
okay with,
so.
if we could get convention center again at Van Horn, that's a nice facility. It's fine, plenty big.
Was that the one that we went to before?
We've been there before.
Struggled with.
That was hard. Their
Internet.
internet.
There was
isn't
some
as-
major tech problems.
Yeah. There was
With the
some-
convention center there was?
in Van Horn.
Yeah,
And
the acoustics are not that great, and we do struggle with internet access at times.
Yeah.
in that small room?
Yes. The acoustics are fine in the small room. I
Well,
don't know what kind of equipment they have available for us to connect.
Can there be a hybrid, like a location here and have a satellite location for others to join in?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Overcome.
El
It can be
Paso.
just like this.
Like, yeah, that's on Alpine.
Invitations to team meetings.
They can do it virtually.
I mean, you would have to, officially, the hearing has to be in one location, but you can
Right.
have virtual
A
access,
viewing.
a viewing from anywhere.
Well, that's
So,
probably easiest from here then.
yeah,
Right. And
yeah.
then that way, you can have one in Alpine, the virtual.
Yeah, the hearing can be in El Paso, and then we can coordinate a rural viewing for anyone who's interested.
Okay, and,
Alpha.
We could do the
okay,
restaurant there.
what day of the week is the 15th of April?
So I just threw that out. That would be like the earliest to allow, for the publishing of all those copies for the county clerks and the public libraries. And then I know Annette and Peggy have to send out a notification to 200, 300 plus water right holders. So we need to give them time to put all the mailings together. So end of April, first week in May is kind of a nice buffer for the ladies to have some time to get all of the notices out to the appropriate folks as to when the public hearing will be.
So
Thursday.
So what's your preference, Jennifer? I mean, we're okay with whatever you feel is appropriate. We could do it
Okay.
the week 22, 23, 24 April or, you know,
29, 30.
into May, 29, 30 and 1 May, wherever it fits for you.
Okay, so Easter weekend is April 20th. I'm not, sure how many folks would take a Monday off. I'm okay, 22 through 25, or the first week in May.
Let's do it in April.
5, starting with 5, 5th.
So that last week in April, the 24th, for example, 23, 24 gives everybody time to get things distributed that need to be distributed and set up for whatever we need set up.
I think that gives Peggy and Annette plenty of time to get
Yeah.
the notices out.
Everybody's nodded yes here.
And what
Okay.
time? Day.
Yeah,
And
do you want
then
evening?
what time of day is it similar to what we've done today or is it a morning event?
No, we usually do after work. So if people want to come when they finish their day, right? Isn't that when we've normally done it?
I like that idea. I would have to look back to see like when in the day we have historically done it, but it doesn't have to follow the structure of our regional water plan. So if we want to provide like a 6 p.m., public hearing for members of the public to come if they want after they've gotten off work. What day were you looking at? Was it the 23rd or the 24th?
Pretty much your choice, either one, whatever you think. We were talking 23, 24 here.
I like 24. Thursday.
Okay. At 1800 or at 6 p.m.?
Teresa, do you think that works? At 6
Sure.
p.m.? Okay.
6
That's
p.m.
now-
6 p.m. Mountain would be 7 Central. You want to go
Okay.
5 Mountain and set 6
At
p.m.
6
Central?
p.m.
That'd be
Central.
better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's go 5 Mountain and 6 p.m. Central then.
Okay.
And the location would be at the COG?
At the COG, and then
With the
we have
remote.
to see if BBT is open at that time.
Oh, that's a good point.
Because that's after hours, that would be 6 p.m. So I don't know, if
Just-
that would be good, but we could do maybe the library
Yeah,
in
but
Alpine or something.
on your notice, it will have to have one physical place where you or Scott will be.
We'll probably be here.
So here, okay, so the notice will say
So the notice will say here, and then we'll give
with virtual, yeah.
extra, yeah, and then we'll have a Teams link, and then if we can get, like,
Yeah.
maybe John and I can work on the rural, see what location would be available at 6 p.m. And so we could say we'll have a standing satellite option.
Does that work for you guys?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
And
So I think we've locked in 24 April, 5 p.m. Mountain, 6 p.m. Central, with the main location being here at the COG and then a remote site to be determined.
I was just curious as to the outreach. Do we reach out to local elected officials, et cetera, at each entity?
Yeah,
yeah.
they each receive a hard snail mail copy of the hearing notice, and you'll be in the newspaper.
That'll all come.
Radio.
On the
We've been doing
radio.
we've been getting
Great.
PSAs together and stuff, yeah.
Okay.
And you can spread the word too.
I'll look forward to it.
Yeah.
Yes, I'd love to.
Get on your social.
So Peggy, just as a side comment on that, if for some reason the facility isn't available at 5, will you just let the group know and we can modify the time?
I'm sure between the BBT, the public library, or Sol Ross, we can get something.
Right.
Okay.
we'll
Okay,
let
I
you know.
have it.
All right, I've got one other thing I want to bring up before we get a motion to adjourn. I went to the 9 December, actually attended it electronically, the 9 December Regional Planning Group Chairs Call. And there were a couple subjects brought up in there that I wanted to ask you, Jennifer. Do we have any interregional conflicts? If we do, there's a requirement to send those in to the water board by 2 May. And I don't know of any, but I wondered if we have any.
No, we do not have any interregional conflicts. We do coordinate with Region M. So we have that documented in our plan, but no conflicts.
Okay, so there's no overlapping projects that address more than one region in our case?
No.
Or in this case affects us?
Right. No, and the other region that we share a border with is Region F, and it's Jeff Davis County. And there's water being exported out of Jeff Davis County into a small WUG in Region F. And that's all been coordinated and documented. And the database where we have to put the data in, there's no kind of like red flag there. So no conflict for either region that we border.
Okay, Temple also mentioned something about data entry progress, up on data entry status.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak about that. I just wasn't sure how many folks are interested in that part of the submittal. The Water Development Board, as you know, when you go onto their website, has a beautiful like interactive database. And what feeds that is the data that the technical consultants have to put into the database. Also in your executive summary, and I'm not sure which page, but there's new language that the Water Development Board required we include, and it talks about how any one person from the public can access the database and access various reports within the database by following these 4 steps. And so that's in our executive summary. But to let the group know kind of where we're at on the status of our database, all of the data has been entered in. I have ran 5 or 6 reports that would help identify any kind of data checks, is what the Water Development Board calls that. So as you're entering in the data, if the database picks up an inconsistency or an over allocation or something of that nature, it will cause those cells to go red. So right away, you kind of have this data flag. I have worked through all those reports to resolve the very few data checks that came up when I was done entering in all the data. Now, there were some items that were flagged as a data check where if you're certain that the data you've entered is correct, please submit an appeal. So then I have to type a justification as to why that data is what it is, submit the appeal, and then the database team at the Water Development Board takes time to go through every appeal and then coordinates with me on what was accepted, what was rejected, and why was it rejected, and how they want me to resolve it. And so the database team is a little overwhelmed right now with the amount of data coming into the database from across all 16 regions, and they're working endlessly to address all of the appeals. And so slowly, you know, I'm getting these email responses back from them saying, that's been accepted, you're fine. That's been accepted, you're fine. And they will have to finish up that part of the database before March 3rd. And they're working towards that end. But I've checked every day just in case the bordering regions have put something into the database that then inadvertently causes our numbers to not jive. And there's been nothing so far. So we are good to go for our submittal, both physically, the 2 hard copies to the Water Development Board, and then there's this big electronic submittal that has to take place. And part of the requirement is to make sure you've resolved all your data checks in the database by March 3rd. And Region E is good to go. Once this meeting closes, I can do that electronic submittal for this planning group and have the plan in their hands physically and electronically. So no big issues there.
Okay, thanks, Jennifer. I didn't have any other questions from that meeting. So are there any other comments from anybody before we get a motion to adjourn?
I just wanted to do one big shout out for this slide. I wasn't sure how many folks from the region would be interested, but the Water Development Board sent me an email that talks about the brackish team at the Water Development Board is looking to do a brackish groundwater well in order to collect some supplemental data. And they're trying to do a really, great job and a very thorough job in studying, brackish water as a resource for future supply. So they've put out an email that says they're partnering up with Justin Sutherland. I'm not quite sure who he is with, but there's money that they will provide to the interest, the party that, I think they choose as kind of the best location for the supplemental study to drill this exploratory well. If anyone's interested in sharing this information or passing it on maybe to some of our groundwater conservation districts, if you could reach out to Christy Laughlin. They're taking responses up until it looks like March 18th. And this is all in my slideshow that's posted on the COG. So if for some reason you're interested or know someone who might be, the information is there in the slideshow. So, and that is all I have to share.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments?
Did you vote to approve the IPP?
Yes.
You did? Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, John made.
I
Okay.
motioned it back in
Sorry.
Right next
second.
to you.
You were sleeping? Napping?
Oh, is that, okay.
You're too young to be.
It's that deep sonorous voice of his.
Okay, I guess I need a motion to adjourn. Albert, that's your role usually.
I move with adjourn.
Oh, boy, okay. And that was second,
Teresa.
Teresa's second. Any discussion? Probably none, but I'm asking. Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right.
And some good waves. Any opposed? Thanks, everybody.
Thank you guys. Have a
April.
great Thursday.